My name is Laser Dave, and we have a wonderful seminar that I have helped create here today called Signage Techniques and Materials. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions during this webinar, please post them when you have the questions, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar in the order that they were received. So let's move forward and get going on this awesome new seminar that I have just created. I've spent over 100 hours developing this brand new content for you. And let's get going and show it off and let us know if you have any questions, and we'll have some fun today. All right, today's seminar is called Signage Techniques and Materials. It is a seminar based on laser processing materials and making signage. This seminar utilizes QR codes, and so when you watch this seminar later, or if you want to go through it now, you can hold your phone up to the QR codes and it'll take you to different links that'll take you to videos, different locations, maybe files or web pages. If you're not familiar with how to use it on your phone, all you have to do is turn the camera on, point it at the QR code, and it'll show a link on your phone. You don't have to take an actual photograph. It's a quick and easy method to access locations via your phone. And then if you need that information later at a later date, you can, of course, send that link from your phone to your email address so that you can access the files on maybe your PC. Trotec is a very social company. We are available in all the different social media platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Twitter. So please follow us on your favorite social media platform so that you can keep up with current techniques, applications, materials, products. Today's outline is going to include an overview on lasers, the process of engraving, direct engraving signage, paintville signage, dimensional signage, multi-material, 3D signage, ADA, solid surface, inlay, vinyl alternatives, direct print and cut type signage, lighted signs, as well as different resources and supplies. And then we're going to move forward at the end of the seminar to answer your questions with myself and our Trotec Consumables manager, Alan Ceresney. Laser signage applications is probably one of the most diverse products you'll ever come across. The laser systems themselves can run just about every type of sign you can think of, from decorative, advertising, print and cuts, contour, illumination signs. We can cut acrylic letters with and without backlight, large format engraving, LED panels. There's really no limitation that I've come across on lasers. It is one of the most awesome technologies when it comes to processing signage, and especially when it comes to just working with materials in general. Lasers allow for an extreme flexibility in terms of applications and materials for advertising technology. And the way that it works is that laser beam is a universal tool for all geometries and material thickness. So basically you have one tool for all types of materials. So instead of having a printer that prints onto materials, that's pretty much all it does is print. A laser can engrave, it can cut, it can mark, and it can process a vast amount of materials so that you can create all these unique different types of signs and materials and different processes that you can do things that you just cannot do in other ways. And so now I'm going to go through some of the different lasers that we manufacture and kind of show you where they kind of lie within the signage market. Our entry-level system, that's a great new system that we have just come out with in the last year, and this is Trotec's new R500. It is a low-cost, large-format cutting machine. So you get a very large machine for a very affordable price. At 51 by 35 inches, it is great for your small and medium signage. Great for ADA, dimensional letters. It will engrave, but it is going to engrave at a slower rate of speed, but it is primarily used for large format cutting methods for when you need that large cutting field without a lot of cost involved. The next, if you want speed of engraving as well as the ability to cutting, is starting off with our entry level of our Speedy series. Our Speedy series is just like it's named, Speedy. It is a much faster for engraving. They range from 100 to 170 inches per second engraving speeds, and so they're ideal for doing engraved signs, small signage, dimensional letters, ADA signs, point of purchase type signs. You are limited to the field size based on the overall sign size. Basically, the field size is going to be the largest individual component that you can place in the machine. So if one component of the sign is no larger than 12 by 24 inches, the Speedy 100 would work for that type of signage that you're working on. However, if you have large outdoor lettering where the signs are 4 feet by 8 foot on individual letters, you would need a much larger machine. And that's where the different ones come in. Speedy 360 and Speedy 400 are going to be the next size up. These are great for your small and medium sides, even faster speeds at 140 inches per second on the engraving for the 360 and 170 inches per second for the Speedy 400. This is our most popular models. They will process incredibly high speed engraving, as well as give you a decent field size, great for your small and medium signage. They'll cut and engrave, dimensional type cutouts, ADA, point of purchase type signage. Just a great all-around versatile machines, and they are definitely our most popular two models in our product line. The Speedy 400 also offers a pass-through, as well as the Speedy 500 or SP 500. Pass-through is a great feature to have for signage, and this is the systems that will allow this capability, because you can actually put the product all the way through the machine to where it goes front to back. This way, if you're engraving or cutting components of a much larger product, you can stick it through the machine and then not have to actually have a smaller product. It doesn't have to fit within the machine itself. And that larger field size can make a big difference on what you can do. However, when you do run pass-through, it does turn your system to a much higher classity, from a class 2 to a class 4 laser. Means you're exposed to the laser. So there are some liabilities involved when running this mode, but then the system can be closed up. These systems can be closed up and then run back as your class 1 or your safety class 2 systems. Trotec also makes, of course, a large format system. Large format systems are going to give you the ability to do very large signage, outdoor signage, dimensional, mass production. You can also, of course, do the small stuff all the way to the very large stuff. These are also a class 2 laser, so that there's no open, the lasers are not open. You can be running them without safety glasses. They are a great alternative to when you need a high-powered laser system with a very large field size. Table options on our systems. I'm going to cover a couple different accessories that I would recommend for signage. One that is very necessary is your table options. Different tables are going to give you different capabilities when it comes to cutting and engraving. And when it comes to engraving materials, it doesn't really matter what table you use for if you're just engraving. Cutting, however, can be a difficulty. And so if you're doing like small details, the honeycomb is ideal. If you're doing a lot of acrylic lettering and you don't want reflection, say lighted signage where light's going to go through the acrylic, maybe the acrylic cutting grid, because it'll keep any reflection points from happening. We also have an acrylic slat, an aluminum slat. Vacuum tables for holding thin materials that tend to want to warp and not want to stay flat. So the vacuum table is ideal for that. The aluminum cutting grid in the center bottom here is the most popular, in my opinion. It's kind of your all around. It'll create a vacuum. Also, it's good for cutting, engraving on, and most will just leave that one in. But we have a lot of different choices here depending on which system you have. Not all systems, of course, will use each table, so the system availability does vary. So make sure you check with the system you have. Will determine which cutting tables or table choices that you can select. Air assist is another must when it comes to making a lot of signs. Unless you're just doing basic engraving, if you're planning on doing a lot of different cuts, then you want to, of course, have air assist. Air assist is designed to shield the lens by protecting it from any damage and dust. The job control software will control the air assist automatically by turning it on and off based on your design, your color. You can control how much, when you use airflow, And this is a ideal solution when especially when you're cutting materials out. So if you're doing any dimensional type cutting, thick cutting and stuff like that, air assist is an ideal solution for that. And here is a list of which laser systems that we currently make and how the air assist product aligns with it. So if you do have it, you can add it to it if the machine supports it. Or if your machine already has it. Most systems we will promote and keep in stock do have air assist because it is such a viable accessory. So let's get into some signage. Signage is a very diverse product that can be done with the lasers, and it is very popular with lasers because lasers can work with so many different materials. And so I've kind of broke this seminar down to a couple different segments here, and the first one is just your basic engraving signage. Engraving is not doing any cutting, just literally sticking different materials into the laser, etching away the actual details to provide the actual graphic needed. Signage can be created by simply processing these materials through your laser system, putting it in and run it. And I'm going to focus mainly on our most common materials in signage. There are really no limitations. I mean, I've picked a large flat stone off the ground, stuck it in the laser and engraved a sign on it for a garden. So you're not limited to what kind of materials you can process in the material. Most materials will at least mark. If it's a combustible material, it will also cut. But for just engraving into the surface of the material, most materials will do that as well, as long as it's relatively flat. We're going to primarily focus on the most common, which is laminate, which is also known as engraver's plastic, wood materials, as well as acrylic, and in the signage industry. Trotec Plastics, or laminates, are a UV-resistant acrylic-based laminate for both indoor and outdoor applications. They benefit from a thin top layer that allows for detailed engraving at high processing speeds. What makes this type of laminate type signage work so well is that you can get it in just about any color you can think of. And the way that it works here in the lower left-hand corner, the cap layer is a very, very thin cap layer. The laser beam ablates or vaporizes that cap layer and exposes the core layer. So you've got a thick core and a thin cap, and then the laser engraves away that cap layer, exposing the core, producing the contrast. These are typically an acrylic-based product, and so there are indoor versions of it as well as outdoor versions. Here's a QR code in the corner if you want to scan this QR code and be taken to our webpage that will explain a little bit more details on this. When you're processing plastic, this type of plastic, there are a few different accessories and options and stuff that I would recommend. One, aluminum cutting grid or acrylic cutting grid is recommended. I typically will cover excess surface areas to improve the vacuum and keep the material in place. So if you cover up this vector grid that you see in the upper right hand corner with some tape or paper, and then you put this plastic in there, it's going to keep any type of warping from happening. If you engrave a little too much power on it or a lot of area, the stuff can warp a little bit. And so the vacuum table does help in this case. If you're doing small signs, it may not be necessary, but then of course you need this aluminum cutting grid table to of course cut the material out as well. You can change the engraving direction. I do suggest that engrave this type of material from the bottom up. The software allows for that, so when you're sending your file to the laser system in job control, you can actually change the engraving direction to engrave from the bottom up. This just keeps the workpiece clean while it's while you're processing it with the laser, and reduces the chance of the core layer becoming discolored from debris and residues during the engraving process. Here's a video of the process. What I've done is taken this winery sign real quick, and I've taken the TroGlass plastic. Again, here's a QR code for the plastic that I'm going to use, and I've taken a mahogany kind of wine-colored plastic, and I'm going to engrave it here with my Speedy 400 and I'm running here at 250 DPI, and we're going to do the sign, and this is a kind of a burgundy, kind of a champagne colored color, and then the core is white, and that white background color is what you're exposing when you're engraving this. And so this is a nice type of plastic, and you can really see here exactly what this type of sign material does. It produces the contrast that you want in the two colors that you want, and then gives you the ability to just engrave it away to produce whatever graphic or image that you want on it. And then in this case, I can then cut it out. There is a little bit of residue that is forming on the top, but just a dry cloth over the surface of it, as you can see here. We'll wipe that away for our finished sign. This process can be done on hundreds of different color combinations. So if you want blue on white or green on gold and all these different types of color combinations that maybe a customer needs, you can take this plastic and you can use it for that signage. You can buy it with adhesive already on the back, so it can be adhered to other materials or walls. It can be added on for architectural type signs as well as indoor signs, outdoor signs. It is probably the most common signage material in the marketplace, especially for lasers, due to the fact that you can get just about any color combination that you need or want. Metallic colors, you can do standard colors, you can do, I mean, it's quite amazing. Take a look at the websites if you are interested in this material so that you can understand how it works, as well as maybe get a sample pack so that you can practice with it. Now, in some cases, I do recommend if you do over engrave it or you have a lot of different residue, there are materials that I recommend keeping in your toolbox, and that is hexanes. Hexanes is a great cleaner for this type of plastic because you don't want to clean alcohol-based plastics like this with alcohol is what I'm trying to say here. Hexanes are a petroleum-based cleaner, and I do highly recommend keeping them when you're processing plastics. And this is a good laser hack that you can kind of see. It gives you, kind of brings that detail out. If you get a little bit of haze or residue that does form from your engraving process, the hexanes are going to is a great tip. So using your air assist, using your cutting grid, engraving it with the right settings, engraving from the bottom up into the color contrast you want, and then using a few little hexane cleaner to clean the material out so that you can get that nice finished, polished looking laser engraved plastic sign. Here are a few very popular examples of signage right now. The COVID signs right now have been very, very popular for distancing, wash hands, and stuff like that. During these uncertain times, you know, there are a lot of signage. And so this is a great market to get into if you're not already. It is definitely one that they can't seem to make them fast enough. And at the end of this seminar, I will also give you some QR codes that are to take you to some projects. And so you can actually take and run a lot of these different projects that you see in the files here so that you can actually reproduce them, order the materials, and then get the file downloads to do that. Wood is the next material that I'm going to process since we've covered the laminate plastics. Wood is probably one of the most popular when it comes to lasers because it's so diverse. Woods come in all different colors and shapes and sizes and varieties, works in all different industries. It engraves dark with a brownish or whitish colored engravings. It is a awesome material because it's natural. Natural materials tend to have a higher perceived value. And so when you're processing wood, there are a few different things that I do recommend with the wood to make sure that the wood is finished. And this is why I would recommend certain types of woods. Any wood is going to work with the lasers, whether it's chipboards, man-made woods like chipboards, multiplex, MDF woods, plywoods, or if it's natural wood or veneers, solid wood, solid timber, precious woods. All woods are going to work. What I do suggest is if you are using wood with the laser system, make sure that wood is completely finished before you process it with the laser. The reason is the wood has to be sanded down and smooth, and then it's been finished with a polyurethane, a lacquer, or like a varnish prior to being processed with the laser. And because the reason that is because the residue and haze and smoke that comes from the lasering process, which effectively is a burning process, will actually stain that wood. And you can sand it off, but you can lose detail. You can break details off. And so I do suggest that you sand the wood or order wood like from Trotec here that is already ready to go. Make sure you order the wood that is all done, so this way you don't have to finish it yourself. Or if you do want to finish it yourself, make sure that it's finished before you process it. Trotec does supply different types of solid wood panels: veneer wood, MDF wood, plywood, and a new TroCraft Eco, which is a derivative of wood. It's like basically like recycled paper in a wood form. Really neat stuff, and I do suggest you play with it. Here's a QR code. It'll take you to the wood web page if you want to see all the different products that Trotec currently produces on our material page. Now, processing wood, as long as it's a finished wood, I do suggest the aluminum cutting grid for cutting, especially if you're going to cut the material. If it's just engraving, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter which table you have into it. The lens type, typically I'm going to use the 1.5 or 2-inch. 2-inch most commonly is suitable for just about any wood engraving. For cutting it, also the 2-inch is the most common for up to 1/4 inch into close to 1/2 inch. If you go beyond 1/2 inch, I do suggest at least going to like a 2.5-inch lens. Otherwise, you'll start to see a little bit of angle forming on the cut. Using a too short of a lens can actually cause a slight angle due to the divergence of the actual beam itself. So standard lenses, nothing special. As long as the wood is finished, you can finish it out from the laser and then wipe it off afterwards. And here's an example. Here's a simple coffee shop type sign that's already been cut out. I'm going to engrave it here on solid cherry wood. I do prefer lighter grain woods due to the fact that when you engrave into wood, it's going to produce a dark effect. And so if you're engraving into a dark wood, then you're going to see a dark effect on dark wood. And so the contrast is going to be lower. So lighter wood species are going to work better. Also, tight grain woods like cherry and maple work much better than, say, oak or pine because of the grain. You really see the grain on some types of wood. So type of wood can make a difference. And now the finished wood that I have here, you can see I'm just taking a damp cloth and I can wipe off the surface for the finished result within seconds. If I have to sand this afterwards and then re-lacquer it, it's a lot more time consuming. And if there's a lot of detail in the signage itself, you can actually break little pieces off with a sander, so it's hard to do that. So I do suggest that the wood is finished. I do suggest that it's a lighter colored wood if you just want to use natural wood to produce the contrast. I do have a lot of other resources online as well. Please follow us on TroTecUSA's YouTube channel. Here's a QR code. I produce a series called Laser Hacks. These are different process techniques and tips and tricks that are going to make you more efficient. It's all free. Sign up to our YouTube channel, and so you can constantly keep up with all these new little tricks to the trade. I've got like 30 more of them in line to be posted, and every couple weeks we add more stuff. Plus, we're always adding new and exciting techniques, trips, or capabilities with the laser, maybe features and options, as well as these seminars. Acrylic is the next material we're going to cover as the top 3 materials with lasers. Acrylic is the #1 choice for eye-catching and creative type applications because it comes in so many different capabilities or looks. Trotec offers the TroGlass color, the duo, the frosted satins, LED-based material, reverse engravable, clear, mirrored, metallic, and even glitter. The different colors are going to give you different capabilities with especially signage, because acrylic of all materials is probably one of the most eye-catching materials that you can find. It has got that opaque, transparent, translucent look and reflective material look that is it's hard to do, and because it is laser engravable and laser cuttable, it makes one of the best companions for lasers, and it's done this naturally. So what that means is the material itself has always worked with lasers. It's wasn't designed for lasers like the laserable plastic, the TroGlass Plastics that I showed you earlier. So TroGlass comes in a large range of acrylic sheets in a variety of colors, different finishes, degrees of transparency. There are certain ones that are specially developed for lasers, including acrylic glass, which is the #1 choice for eye-catching and creative applications. Basically, it's a clear acrylic that has that jade look, kind of that greenish look that looks like glass. And so when you cut it, it looks like it's actually been cut glass. Acrylics are high weather resistance and they're optimal for light scattering. So there's a lot of different choices. It is a great material to work with. There are a few things. If you are buying your own acrylic outside of buying the Trotec brands of acrylic, then just kind of understand the difference between acrylics. There are 2 types of acrylics out there. There's cast acrylic and there's extruded acrylic. So if you're going to your local Home Depot or something like that to pick up acrylic, that's fine. All acrylic will typically work with the laser, but some will work better than the others. Cast acrylic is the type of acrylic that Trotec carries, and it is the most recommended for lasers. And the reason is cast acrylic is cast into a mold from made from glass that's submerged into warm water and then processed the process of polymerization takes place. Cast acrylic will engrave white as well as cut very well. So you can see in the picture here on the right, the cast acrylic turns kind of a frosty, bright white. Extruded acrylic is usually your lower cost acrylic. This is the stuff that you're going to pick up in kind of the windows section of your home improvement store. Now, extruded acrylic basically is manufactured by heating up the acrylic pellets and then pushing them through an extruder barrel. Kind of like a spaghetti or pasta noodle, it takes the heated material and extrudes it out into a sheet. And that sheet is then cooled, and then it actually produces a sheet of acrylic. The difference is when the laser engraves the acrylic that's been processed or made this way, it produces a transparent look when you engrave it. It's kind of an opaque transparency, and it does not produce the contrast when engraved. So make sure you use the right acrylic. If you're just cutting, extruded acrylic can tend to be a lower cost, and so therefore it's going to give you a lower cost solution for just cutting the acrylic. However, if you need the ability to engrave the white frosty effect onto the surface, your acrylic does need to be a cast acrylic. Here's an example of a pre-cut acrylic sign that I'm going to engrave. I'm going to do this on our frosted acrylic, or our matte, satin acrylic is actually what it is. And here's a QR code. So this is a satin blue acrylic. So it's got a transparent opaqueness to it. And the laser is going to engrave into the surface of the cast acrylic. And then we're going to basically expose that frosted effect into it. And the nice thing about this, because it is opaque, it can be backlit, it can be side lit, it produces a lot of good contrast. After you're done engraving, just take just a dry cloth and just wipe off the surface if you get any dust on the surface for this nice finished result. As you can see here, it's a nice frosted effect onto the surface of the acrylic, producing high contrast, kind of that jewel toned look. The edge quality is nice and blue. If you hold it up to the light is going to shine through it. And so you really do get that real effective, nice look into the acrylic. And for that, just engraving it. We'll get into cutting here in a few minutes. Now, taking it a step further from just engraving is paint filling. Paint filling is popular in the signage industry because it allows you to work with materials that don't necessarily give you the correct color, and then add that color necessary to maybe fulfill a customer logo, for example. And so paint filling is a great solution. Lasers are going to give you the ability to do the paint fill by working with different plastics and different paints. Acrylic paints are ideal because they are UV stable, and they also work well with plastics. You'd want to stay away from alcohol-based paints with plastic. Anytime you use alcohol with acrylic, it'll actually cause the acrylic to crack. So stay away from alcohol-based paints or cleaners when it comes to acrylics. But when you use paint on the back of a mirror that you engraved away, or on the back of a transparent acrylic that's already been painted, like the types of plastics, it's going to give you the ability to turn that sign around and see that graphic. And here's an example. Here is a cast gloss acrylic with color coating on the reverse side. We also sell a TroGlass Reverse, which is the same type of plastic instead of acrylic. Then we're going to take our graphic and we're going to mirror it. And when we engrave this on the back of the TroGlass plastic reverse material, or we do it on the back of the acrylic reverse. And so basically it's a transparent core, and then the cap layer, as I showed you earlier, as a color. And so we're exposing that color. Then after we've engraved through it, we'll take it out of focus and we'll engrave over it again by about 1/2 inch. When we engrave it out of focus, it gives me a transparency. Now, on the back side, I'm going to go ahead and paint it. When you paint the back side, it's going to basically fill up those areas. I will mask over certain areas if I want to add additional colors, like you see here. So in this case, I painted the whole back white. And then we're going to remove the mask after that's dry, and I'm going to add a couple different colors. And this is going to basically the paint's only going to go in the window from the back side. And then when you flip it over and peel the film off, you now have a multicolored, UV stable, beautiful, high quality sign that can be put on to the front of a building, to be done anywhere. And this is one on the front of my office building right now. Due to the COVID right now, it is now mandatory to wear face masks in public areas. So this is just a very popular sign. And that is a great material because the reverse Engravable stock like acrylic and the TroGlass Reverse plastic give you the ability to engrave away the back coating, whatever color choice that you pick, and then take it out of focus and engrave it again, which makes it a little more transparent so that the paint goes through a little better. Then apply the paint to those pockets and then flip it over for that finished, high contrast, multicolor, UV stable, diverse, very shiny, polished looking sign. Now, you can also, of course, do paint fill signs using masking, and there's several different types of masking. This one is basically a liquid mask. When you basically paint it on, liquid mask is nice because there's no chance of any air bubbles underneath the like paper tape. So once you've painted on, you take and engrave the graphic right into the substrate. Doesn't matter what material you're using. And then you just paint into that actual surface itself. So the laser is exposing the area that you want to paint. So only the area that has been exposed from the laser, and in this case, I've just hand painted 2 different colors into the logo. And then once it is completely dry, you just go ahead and remove the mask. Liquid mask is nice because once it's dry, it performs just like any other mask. Peel that mask off for your finished, nice subsurface color-filled paint. Or painted sign. So this is a great method for actually producing a surface. And so you don't have that reverse transparency. Maybe you're engraving onto the surface of the material. Now you can also do this with paper tape as well. Paper tape is going to work just as well. And especially, in this case, it's just blue painter's tape. You can also use application tape. It really doesn't matter as long as it sticks well to the surface of the material. So this is a piece of wood that is going to be engraved. And in this case, I'm going to engrave the background. So I've made the background black and I'm leaving the letters white. So the laser is going to etch away all the black, leaving the letters on the surface. And so this is the case where the wood is not producing enough contrast, but I still want the letters to look like the wood. But I also want the background grain still to show, so it still kind of looks like wood. So in this case, I've masked off the whole thing, engraved everything except for the letters. And then after I've spray painted it, I then peel off the mask off the surface of the wood. Again, make sure your wood is finished before you do this. Otherwise, the mask won't stick very well with a polyurethane or a lacquer on the surface. And then peel off each one of the components of the sign itself for your finished results. You can still see the grain pattern in the back of the sign here. And it produces a really stark, beautiful look. If you want different colors in the background, of course, you can spray it with your reds and greens and yellows, any color you want, so that maybe it matches a color of a logo or a corporate sign that you want to actually do. But they still want to see that wood grain or that natural look to kind of have that higher perceived value of a laser engraved sign. The other nice thing about this is it's one solid piece. There's no individual components or pieces on this sign. It's one solid finished product. Pieces can't fall off over time or heat up because it's etched out of that one solid piece of material. Acrylic cutting is another very popular and basic acrylic, wood, any other type of laserable, cuttable material is also ideal for the laser itself. Acrylic is ideal for lasers because when it's cut with a laser, it produces almost a molded acrylic look. The laser itself produces a flame polished edge right out of the machine. No other technology can do this. You can get down into intricate little corners and details, and you can cut out acrylic as though it was molded in that shape from its inception. And that's the benefit of cutting acrylic with the laser. However, it is highly flammable. So you want to be very, very careful and make sure you do it properly. Use the right cutting table. Make sure you have a good exhaust, a good vacuum under the material. And you also always want to cut the acrylic in one pass. Don't think I have a lower wattage, so I'm going to hit it with 3 different passes. The reason is the quality is going to go down for each pass that you actually try to cut, and it's just going to look shoddy. If you can get through in one continuous, smooth cut pass, it's going to give you that seamless looking glass edge if it is done correctly. Thick acrylic can be difficult. If you have enough power, you can definitely do it. And so this is more than an inch thick piece of acrylic. High wattage is necessary, but flame can be a tricky one. You want to make sure that you do it properly, like leaving the film on the surface when you're doing it. It can reduce the flare up, and I typically like to leave the film on at least the back side, but not on the front side. But you got to be careful with especially paper backings, because it can potentially actually cause flare-ups. Make sure you have enough power on your laser system if you are looking to cut very, very thick acrylic. Thin acrylic is not that big of a deal. It's not a problem at all. Most wattages can cut it, but as you get into thicker acrylic, I do suggest maybe looking at my laser hacks. I have one coming up which really go into details of cutting different acrylics. So here's an example of a 1/2 inch thick piece of acrylic cutting real quick. Of course, this is in time lapse. It is not this fast. It is elevated over a wet paper towel. That'll reduce your flames. That's one of my hacks that I produce. Works very well to keep any flame, and you get that nice finished flame polished edge when cutting acrylic. But dimensional letters are very popular with the laser system, because dimensional letters will give you the ability to actually give you that raised physical letter component of signage, which means that laser cutting is ideal for that. The other benefit, unlike routers and other methods of cutting, you can get the real tight corners. The beam diameter on the laser, typical beam is 5/1000ths of an inch in diameter. That means when you're cutting a corner or a star or a shape, you're not limited to like a bit size. In addition to getting that flame polished edge, you can also get that nice tight cut with the laser systems. Dimensional signage from cutting. So taking letters and using engraving and cutting, we can actually take and create dimensional signage. So just simple cutting letters, I'm going to do a simple sign here, and I'm going to use 2 different colors. And so here's the process of doing a simple sign. And I'm going to use a white and a black acrylic. Now I do that on purpose, and I laminate both white and black together so that the black is going to be in the background, producing a drop shadow effect. Then I'm going to take my letters or my file, and I'm going to send it to the laser itself here. And so your laser sign size is limited to your laser system itself. So this is a pretty large sign. And so if I were to do an outdoor sign, I would be limited to 1 letter per piece of material. So I'm cutting out the Trotec logo here out of a laminated white surface, black background onto the plastic itself. So this is acrylic, 2 layers cut together, and this is the back side here. So you can see the black. Now, after the letters are cut out in this case for a dimensional sign, we're going to add a VHB double-sided adhesive. You want to use the real high quality stuff here, otherwise letters will start falling off the walls. Trust me, I've done that before. So you want to use enough of it. You can put it on the sheet before you cut it, and then so the laser cuts it out, but this stuff is very expensive. So adding just a small few pieces on the back side of each letter first, and then we can use the laser to cut out a template. And this is very important. So this sign is bigger than the the sign itself. So I'm going to cut the template out of some application tape here into 2 pieces, and each piece can be overlaid together onto the wall. Different types of substrate. You can use paper for this. The transfer tape is kind of hard to get out of the laser, but what the template is for your wall itself. So you want to measure the wall, make sure you're in position. So after you've got the sign letters cut out, we're going to then take my template and I'm going to adhere it to the wall. And that's why I cut it out of application tape or transfer tape, so that I can stick it to the wall in the right location. Then we're going to peel the VHB adhesive on the back side of each one of the letters. And then we're going to apply them to the wall. So there we go. We've taken each one of the letters and apply them to the wall, removing the double-sided adhesive on the back side of each one. And this is going to give me my position and orientation. And you don't have to use application tape. Like I said, you can use anything. Once you've got it adhered, now you can just remove your template off of the wall. And we now have our raised letter dimensional sign onto the wall that has been adhered. Typically, the coating or the acrylic has a transfer or an application tape onto the surface, which I have here. I'm going to go ahead and remove this at the very last stage, so that we have our raised letter. And you can see why I use the black here. You get that drop shadow look. Just a technique. You don't have to do that, of course. But this is a method of how to do dimensional raised letter signs. Very, very popular method to do that. It can be done with any other cutting capabilities as well, but the lasers are going to give you a quick, easy method to both create the template, the letters, the individual cut file, and then we can now put it right onto the wall for our finished result. Now, multi-materials and dimensional letters and engraving, you can combine all of them together. And so running multi-material raised letter, dimensional letter signs is ideal with lasers because it can do the engraving, it can do the cutting, it can take all the different complex, different shapes and colors and combine them together to produce some stunning effects. So combining different materials and substrates, allowing you to take each layer and each element so that and stagger them to produce contrast and really produce some nice different looks with lasers. Here's a few different examples of stuff where I've taken different colors of woods, cut them out, engraved the wood, applied black acrylic, blue acrylic, different colors of acrylic. I will mark the actual outline of where to place it and peel and stick each one of the different design elements onto the surface of it so that you get these stunning raised letter dimensional signs just by using different materials and combining it together. I mean, the ultimate goal of a sign is to get someone to look, you know, whether that's to look at a warning, whether that's to look for a shop or a business environment. The signs are designed to where somebody can actually recognize who or what that sign is referencing to. And so the more attractive and beautiful you can make that sign, the more interested it's going to be, and hopefully it's going to draw in more people, more customers, and that's really the ultimate goal. Now, taking it a step further, dimensional signs can also be used, and the lasers can be used for creating ADA signs. ADA signs is the American Disabilities Act. It's a federal law that states all businesses, restaurants, medical care facilities, libraries, and constructions provide tactile or raised braille characters for all permanent interior signage. This is necessary for the visually impaired people so they can actually feel the surface of the letters as well as the braille dots, which means that they can actually read what those letters are. And so this is necessary to do that, and the lasers can produce stunning, beautiful signs by doing making them every aspect of an ADA sign. So basically, it's one tool that actually creates all these different products. And I'm going to go through a couple different ones because there's a lot of questions on this type of signage with lasers, and people don't realize that how efficient lasers can be at actually producing this type of sign. And so the ADA market is one of the fastest growing and most profitable segments in the laser engraving industry. But the one thing you need to understand if you're not doing it now, or maybe you want to get into it, that these type of signs must adhere to government ADA accessibility guidelines. But if you do it correctly, it can offer huge business growth and a profit potential. But you want to make sure you do it right. And so I'm going to show you a sign here, just step by step of a basic one, and then we're going to do a little more advanced one, a step-by-step multi-dimensional raised letter multi-material sign, and show you the different process. So this is an ADA sign using two different plastics, and it's our ADA Trotec Plastics, or TroGlass Plastics. So I've got a white backing, and I've got the ADA blue surface. And so in this case, the ADA material is at a specific thickness at 020, which is 20 thousandths of an inch, which is the necessary required thickness for the raised letter lines. And so all I'm going to do is adhere the two together, peel the double-sided tape, and then I'm going to take my file, convert it to an outline using the blue for cutting one layer and the red to cut both layer. And the laser is going to cut everything in place. So what it's doing is it's actually cutting through all the graphics and the logos and all the details here all at one time. It's cutting one layer and then two layer. And then all I have to do is just take, as long as you don't wait too long, the adhesive doesn't adhere over time. And then you can just grab a corner and peel it up. This is what makes this type of signs so advantageous. The braille, what I'm going to do is peel it up a little bit, and I'm going to place a piece of double-sided underneath of that. And you don't have to do this, but this allows the braille beads to really stay in place at a much faster. And then I'm going to use a pick, and I'm going to pop out all the individual pieces. So I've now taken all the individual pieces, cut them out, weeded them out, and then I'm going to take just a dry rag, and then I'm going to go over the surface. This is going to take the film that's on the surface of the ADA plastic, and it's just going to peel it off. It's a quick and easy way to get the film off without having to peel them off one at a time. Then I'm going to go to our Accent Signage Braille raster bead gun. This is a tool that allows you to actually plunge the little dots or the Braille raster beads directly into the holes that we laser cut. And this is why I place the double-sided under behind that. You don't have to do that, but it just keeps the chance of these little balls from falling out into the future. And this thing will actually plunge that little ball or that little raster bead directly down into the hole so that you have a nice finished result. And here's a nice clear shot that I took a photo afterwards of that finished result. So now we have our Braille raster beads down into the hole. We have our finished sign. And the thing that I expressed hugely on this type of sign, you can get, of course, any color combination you need in this scenario. But the key with this type of sign is how long it took. This was a 10-inch by 10-inch sign, cut sign from start to finish. Assembly of the material was only 10 seconds. Time to laser cut it was 2 minutes and 29 seconds. And to weed, polish, and add the Braille beads was 2 minutes and 50 seconds. So in 5.5 minutes, from inception to a finished ADA regulation sign with Braille raster beads, it is complete. There is no other methods that could produce a sign of this size with that combination with raised letters at that rate of speed. And so ADA is ideal for doing basic ones like that. Now, if you do want to spend more time and a little more effort onto it to make a little more attractive signs, here's another one where I've taken a mock-up, and here's a mock-up of what I think it's going to look like in the original design, and I'm going to break my file into multiple pieces. And this is going to be multiple pieces for different process. And so I'm going to go through each one of these pieces and show you what I do. So here's the file, and I'm going to cut the base out of a piece of wood. This is one of my background. This is a solid piece of cherry wood. We go ahead and engrave it, and we cut it out. And the little outlines you can see here are a reference point for where my sign is to be assembled. And I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to go to my next piece of material, satin acrylic and ADA material. And I'm going to apply adhesive to the color of acrylic, the satin acrylic, on the one side. And then I'm going to put it into the laser system and cut it out. Then I'm going to peel the adhesive. And then I'm going to peel and apply the color of ADA signage that I want to be put over that. And I'm going to put it right in place on the laser system. Then I'm going to run that file as a separate. I usually just use a separate color in the job file, and then cut that material over the surface of that. And then all you have to do is just grab the corner and peel it off. The inside little components, in this case, you can use a pick or just a simple little blade, and it'll pop that inside part out. You want to do this pretty quickly after you pull it out of the laser, because the adhesive on the backside will set over time. Then a dry rag, of course, will take any of the film that's protecting the surface off the surface of those letters. And then there's the finished result of that piece, and we're going to go ahead and set that aside. And of course, each one of these pieces can be run in production. Now I'm going to produce just a simple piece of acrylic. Apply again adhesive to the backside, and I'm going to just cut a piece of black acrylic in this case. This is just a spacer, and I'll show you what that is when we assemble it. So we're going to go ahead and set that aside as well. And then our final one here is our lettering, and this would be different for each piece. For basically a room, I've taken just a piece of the ADA plastic thickness, which is the 020, and then I'm going to cut out the little Braille dots and then cut it out. And then I'm going to apply my ADA in place like I did before, just approximately where the letters are. And then I'm going to cut the letters out. So they're pre-applied to the surface. And again, I'm going to reach in and just peel up what I don't want to keep. And then we'll pick off the excess pieces. And you want to be careful if you use a metallic material, because you can scratch it in this case for our finished result. Now we have our pieces that are all done. These can be run in production, and then we can assemble them together now. So we're going to take each one of the pieces, and we're going to just basically peel the adhesive that we applied earlier and use the lines that we created here to basically assemble this sign together. Once all the parts are done, we would then have a finished sign. So here's our black piece, which is just a spacer or a riser. So I'm going to place that onto the circle there. And now we're going to take our our ADA piece, which is the raised letter sign with the braille. And then I'm going to peel the back off. And again, I'm going to apply just a little piece of double-sided over those braille raster bead holes on the back side, and then peel off that double-sided. Then I'm going to apply that whole piece to the surface of the material, making sure you keep it positioned. And then we're going to take our accent signage braille raster pen again, and then we're going to actually plunge in the braille dots, in this case, in the same fashion we did on the other ADA sign. I used a different color in this case. The other one I used white beads. This one I used black. They also do like a brass one. They have clear ones. And so there's several different bead choices if you want different visual looks. And so there we go. There's the braille dots with the raised letter signs. And we have a finished overall raised letter, multi-material, multi-dimensional, ADA certified sign that is attractive, multiple colors. It's gonna look good in an office building next to a door. And you can do similar effects like this just by taking different materials, different colors, and putting them together to make very beautiful, attractive, different types of signs. The process is simple because the laser can engrave, it can cut, it can slice, it can dice. It is kind of the ultimate machine when it comes to processing this type of application. Here are some resources. The accent signage again. This is a great resource. They also provide the ADA license and the training to make sure the signs are compliant. You need to make sure that the spacing of the letters, the height and the orientation of the sign is correct. So there is a little bit of training when it comes to creating ADA signs. And so if you scan this QR code for accent signage system, you can buy the license as well as the braille raster bead pen, and then any other resources when it comes to doing ADA. Combined with, of course, the Trotec ADA plastics as well as woods and acrylics to create a combination that will allow you to make ADA signs beautifully and efficiently with your laser system. Let's go on to another one here now that you know how to do that. And another one that's very popular is solid surface signage. Solid surface signage is a common material used for countertops. I like this material for making signage because it has a really nice look. It looks like stone. It feels like stone. It has the weight. It has a very high perceived value. But the one thing most people don't understand and know is that solid surface or synthetic stone type materials are laser friendly. They can be cut and they can be engraved with unbelievable detail. And so I like to use this stuff for making signage because it's very stable type material. It's made from an acrylic based and bauxite. Bauxite is the same material that's typically smelted to make aluminum, believe it or not. And so when you're cutting and engraving, the residue and smoke and stuff can be a bit abrasive on your laser machine. And so you want to make sure you keep your machine clean if you're going to do this a lot. But the finished result is stunning. And I'm going to show you a couple different examples here. Cutting it, you can see the raised letter signs look like they're actually molded that way, but they come right out of the laser system. A little bit of dust on the edge. And this is the Avanite brand that I'm using right now. But DuPont's Corian, LG, there's a lot of different ones out there. Make sure you test it before you'll understand how the laser is going to perform. Sometimes they put additives into certain colors or it doesn't perform the same in this case that you see here. So here's a sign where I'm going to take a piece of the Avanite solid surface material and I'm going to just paint the surface. And the reason I'm going to paint the surface is because the contrast on this material is kind of low. So I'm going to paint the surface first, and then I'm going to apply a transfer tape. Transfer tape is just going to protect that paint for the process of the lasering. So then we're going to take that and stick it in the laser system, and then we're going to engrave this graphic. And I've got a black outline with a red cut line and then a blue outline around the characters. The blue outline gives me a nice vector and kind of a sharp edge, and so the laser will apply a power setting. This is a high-powered application, so I'm going to engrave it with 3 passes. And each pass is going to perform a little bit more depth into the material, so I get that nice raised letter solid surface sign. And then I go ahead and cut it out. Now, once you're finished, it should pop right out of the machine. I like to cut it on a wet paper towel. It just produces a nicer effect on the backside. And then we're going to go ahead and just peel up the tape in this case. And so you're going to expose that. So whatever color you spray painted or painted it with before the image was processed is what you're going to see on the surface. So this is going to give you a raised letter, solid surface sign with high perceived value because it is one solid piece. It looks like stone, feels like stone. It's going to be outdoor UV stable, and it is a stunning method to create actual signage with. You can also actually laser engrave the Braille ADA directly into it so that the finished result is one solid finished piece. It does take a little bit more time on the laser, but very little time in the pre and post processing unless you're painting it in this case. And so this is a great material to work with when it comes to making signage. Again, it is abrasive, the materials that come off of it, and so you really want to wipe your machine down because that abrasive nature can actually shorten some of the mechanics in your laser system. So make sure you keep it very clean and have a good exhaust if you plan on processing this material. All right. Inlay signage is another very popular method of doing signage. Traditional inlay is like wood inlay and stuff like that, which would also work for signage. But inlay signage is the process of actually setting letters inside a channel, for example, so that you can actually produce high contrast type signage. It is great for producing beautiful finished products with mixed medians, so you get that contrast and high quality look, because when you inlay one material into another material, those parts aren't going to fall off. Like the peel and stick signs we did before have the possibility of, if something hits it really hard, those letters could potentially be knocked off because they're only held on with adhesive. Where if they're inlaid into another material, it's far more difficult to do that. And the laser system makes it easy to where you just cut out the different mediums and usually cut out a back plate. And so in the upper right hand corner here, you can see the pieces would be necessary to create the sign in the bottom right hand corner. A back plate, which is made out of white. And then we cut out a black piece of acrylic. And then we cut out our wood letters. And then we peel the adhesive up and just assemble them all together. Now we have a subset inlaid raised letter sign. In the lower left-hand corner is mirrored acrylic. And so I used a silver mirror and a gold mirror and cut it out and then did a back plate with adhesive on it and then dropped it in. And that one is a flush sign. So the letters aren't raised, but it does produce the contrast. Basic ADA sign would be something, or inlay sign would look something like this, to where I've got just a basic outline. I convert it to an outline in my laser file. And then I go ahead and cut out two of each part. So I'm going to cut out a back plate with adhesive on it. And then I'm going to cut out two colors. You know, in this case, it's going to be black and a neon green. And then I'm going to put them all side by side. And now it just comes to assemble. So I'm going to peel the adhesive off. And then we're going to take the black. And then we're going to take the green, which is the neon green here. And then we're just going to mix and match, basically do an inverted version of each one. And so that's what's kind of nice, is there's no waste on something like this as long as you're willing to use the two color combination. Each one of the pieces basically inlay into each other, produce a solid finished sign. So you have all that super high contrast. Inlaid individual parts. They're all flush. And of course, if you use thicker on one and thinner on the other, you're going to have the portions of it that's thicker and thinner if you want that raised letter look. And so this is a great method to create high contrast, durable signs. There's no paint involved, so the color will always stay. Signage for specific applications or markets. Another common question is vinyl signs. Vinyl is a very popular signage material, but it contains PVC, polyvinyl chloride. Polyvinyl chloride or PVC-based products are bad for your laser system. If you don't know already, vinyl can actually produce chlorine gas when laser cut, and it is very corrosive. And that corrosive nature will actually damage your laser system. It'll literally eat metal right out. The component of the chlorine will actually eat metal away over time. And this happens slowly. If you accidentally do one or two pieces, it's not a big deal. Just make sure you clean your system. But it's an exposure of chemicals like chlorine or PVC process over the periods of weeks and months is going to actually cause damage. So if you want to make this type of signs and don't have maybe a vinyl cutter, or maybe you want to apply vinyl to the surface of plastics and then cut it out with a laser, which the vinyl cutter can't do, there is a brand out there called 3M's Envision print wrap film. It's a printable, stretchable, vinyl-like material that looks and feels just like vinyl. And here's the QR code on where to get it. And the benefit of this stuff, yes, it is a bit more expensive, but it is environmentally and laser friendly, and that's the difference. So there's no chlorine gas that comes off of it. There's no PVC. It's a polyester-based material, and it is laser friendly. So you can apply it to the surface of a black acrylic, for example, and then laser cut it out. So you have a white surface with a black core, for example, without having to use other brand, maybe another type of acrylic or plastic. And so, or if you just want to create just like a traditional vinyl sign and put it on a window, like you see here, the Trotec logo, this is what I use to do that. Comes in the different color combinations. Contact your local sign shop to see if they carry it, or go to 3M to find local sign shops that carry it. I found that it is a little difficult to get a hold of, so once you find a supplier to do that, but the 3M site will take you to your local suppliers that do carry this material. Print and cut signage is the next one we're going to do. Instead of painting it or using the contrast of individual materials, in this case, we're using the benefit of owning and operating maybe a printer. And this can be done printed on paper and then cut out with the laser. But the printers these days, such as UV printers, will print directly onto substrates and materials. What that means is I can print on woods and acrylics and plastics and laser cuttable material, and combine that with job control vision, which is an accessory for for the Trotec laser systems that allow the laser system to take registration points and automatically size it and scale it to give you basically Visional module allows a camera system to recognize the rotation of linear, nonlinear distortions, and the printed design can be adjust the cutting path automatically and dynamically. So what this means is you have the ability to print something out. As long as you have a little black dots, you can then cut that out, giving perfect orientation no matter how you place your product into it. So you get both the benefits of printing and color and contrast and photographs from printers, and then the orientation and cutting from a laser system. The camera system is available on our Speedy 300, 360, 400, 500, 1500, 2000, 3000, and soon to be our 4000 system. So if you don't have those systems, we don't have, the camera is not available. But even from our small machines all the way up to our very large machines have this capability. And so once you've printed your graphic, you can see here the different graphic. Here is the little black dots around the Trotec logo. Those black dots are registration points, and we typically use just a 1/4 of an inch circle or smaller, ideally just around a 1/4 of an inch in size, and then send that to the printer. Print it on your paper, your cardboard, your acrylic, which is what I'm using in this case, and then go ahead and process it. And so here's the process itself. Here's a piece of white acrylic that I'm sending through a large UV HP printer. This is a sign shop that's next door to me here, and they printed directly onto this white acrylic for me. And so what I wanted is little signs of our products, of our laser products, but I wanted to cut them out so they're dimensionally the size of the machine itself. And so the large UV printer is not necessary. Any UV printer will work. You could even print onto paper and then adhere it to acrylic as well. But the little registration points are what's necessary to make this work. Stick it in the laser. The print file needs to match the cut file, so you want to break it apart into different layers or into different colors. And then the laser system is going to go out and actively search for the registration points, as you see here. And then it's going to size, scale, skew, and rotate the design so that it gives me a perfect orientation cut. So I don't have to worry about any bleed within the graphic. I'm able to get down to all the intricate little details and cut all these components out. It doesn't matter if this is dimensional letters, signage, components, statues, whatever it is that you want to make. Point of purchase type displays are ideal using this method. So there you go, our finished result. We have intricate laser cut products that were printed first and then cut out. Here's a sign of the Trotec logo out of clear acrylic that was imprinted on the backside, mirrored and then cut out. So you get that stunning, unbelievably beautiful look color contrast onto it. This can also be backlit. It can be underlit. And so you can now have lighted signs that are raised and also cut. It's a great method of making signage with a printing technology that you may have access to or may already own, maybe printing technology. Combine that with the laser to create, again, stunning looking signage. Trotec also makes a digital print series plastic. This is a special plastic specifically designed and pre-treated for superior ink adhesion. So it's designed to actually have the ink actually work directly onto the plastic itself. Most plastics will work with a UV printer, but it can be difficult. Sometimes it has to be coated or a chemical has to be put on it so the ink will not flake off over time. So if you buy plastic like the digital ink series, it's a matte type plastic that is already designed to do that. Lighted signs are the next one here. Lighted signs are your method of actually using the laser system to create the signage displays. You know, similar displays that when you transmit light through them, they actually pop out. Lighted signs are visible 24/7, and with laser technology, it's very easy to produce these types of signs. TroGlass acrylics and LED lights can be created to create elegant glass-like laser cut edges and frosted contrast laser engravings that are UV stable and weatherproof. So another really neat method to actually create visible signage, especially in the darkened times of night. Whether it's a point of purchase, indoor one, or whether it's an outdoor sign, the laser can actually do that. Here's a very, very basic small one that I actually processed using the TroGlass color glass look. So basically, I've taken the engraving. I'm just engrave directly into the acrylic. And when you distort the acrylic with the laser system, the benefit is when the light transmits through it, it actually causes those letters to glow. I run a vector outline around it, which really kind of makes it pop, and then take it out of the laser. And this is what it looks like directly out of the laser, and then into a light base. And then when you go ahead and turn off the light, you then get that contrast that's going to pop up through it. So this type of sign is not only visible and high contrast in the daytime. Once it's lit up, it's of course high contrast in the nighttime as well, giving you that 24/7 lighted sign type stuff. You can buy, of course, long light bases. LEDs are ideal because they can wrap around the edges of acrylic. Different thicknesses can be used. It can be done indoor. It can be outdoor. It is a great method to actually create lighted signs for this process. Now, we've gone through a lot of different signs here, and so I want to give you some different resources here, some resources on exactly kind of where to get some of these different techniques or files and materials and stuff like that. And so here's some different resources. One, Trotec also makes the TroGlass LED acrylic, which is designed to actually transmit LED lights through it, and it glows more. Here's a Estron is a source that I use for light bases, for small light bases, kind of like your 3D pop-up ones and point of purchase ones. Laser Sketch is another source that I use here for the long kind of interior signage is up to like 24 inches long. And then of course, when it goes longer than that, it's typically done individually and one at a time. So those are different resources. If you want to go back to this, this seminar will be recorded. You can access it on our TroTecUSA YouTube page at any time. So if you want to come back to these slides, scan the QR code just so that you can go to these specific locations. You don't feel like you have to do that right now. Here again is the accent signage systems and the Trotec ADA materials for the ADA sign supplies. So if you want to scan this for accent signage system, it's going to take you to the Braille raster bead gun and the licensing in order to do ADA, as well as the Trotec ADA plastic material to make your ADA signage. Another great resource for signage materials, for tools, frames, if you want to do standoffs, that's one signage I didn't get into, using raised letters and then actually adding little holes with the laser to create standoff signs. So you use a standoff to actually make it stick out away from the wall itself. JDS is also a great alternative for sheet stock material, as well as tapes, double-sided tapes, transfer tapes, tools, materials. It's just a good overall resource for laser supplies, not only for signs, but just for lasers itself. Here is a QR code for the Trotec Materials catalog. If you want the actual catalog, a digital version of it, you want to be able to go through it and go through that individual page to page, or of course you can go to our webpage and look through each one of the materials as well. As I said before, I got some different do-it-yourself projects. These are projects that not only give you the file, but they're going to walk you through step by step on how to produce these types of signs. And so a little diner sign, multicolored sign for processing. And not only is it going to tell you where to get the materials, give you the files step by step on how to instruct them and how to set up, as well as the power settings and speed and parameter settings for your Trotec laser system. Here's another fun one. So I'll leave it open here just for a second here so people can scan the QR code when they come back to it at a later date. And then finally, here's another one, the COVID signs. On a lot of the different COVID-19 signage has been very popular. The wash hands, social distancing, all the different signage that people, organizations, buildings, office buildings are putting up in their locations. And, you know, they started with the paper signs, but now they're ordering the custom-made laser cut, laser engraved signage as well. So this is a popular project for you to maybe get into, maybe especially if you're doing like sports trophies or something like that, and you don't have a lot of the business right now. A lot of these types of signage is a great alternative in the meantime. Here's another one where a wall decoration using the standoffs, including, of course, instructions on where to buy the materials, how to get them. Again, process techniques, step-by-step instructions on how to create these. You can also, of course, download the file and modify them. Feel free, they're full vector files, so you can modify them, add your own names, graphics to them. But they do give you the ability to walk through these projects and kind of follow along if you're not familiar with this process. So you can do one that's already done and get familiar with the process. And so it's then going to give you the confidence to then move forward with making, designing, or developing your own signage and maybe working into that. To help you out here, Trotec has the deal of the month here for materials, $25 off of $100 anytime you purchase online. You're using June promo 2020. Feel free to go in and use that. I know we're about halfway through the month now, but take advantage of this. Just go to engraving-supplies.com and you can take advantage of this deal right now. So you can maybe work with some of these projects, or if you want to order some of the different materials for the different projects, you have the ability to download the exact files as well as order the exact materials so you can follow along with that project. If you missed last month's webinar on laser marking methods, here's a QR code you can watch last month. Again, subscribe to TroTecUSA's YouTube channel if you want to be kept up to date with these webinars, training techniques, technique videos, and all the different content and collateral that we produce constantly. All right. Well, thank you so much. That is the end of our webinar. I'm gonna now move forward working with Alan Ceresney. He is our marketing, not marketing. He's our materials manager for Trotec Laser when it comes to materials. And he and I are going to go ahead and move forward and answer some questions for you that you may have posted during this event. Alan, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for that seminar. It was great.
Oh, good. Good information.
I'm just going to start off by being the bad guy.
Okay.
Everybody's all excited about those acrylic signs. I'm just going to warn people. Thanks to the COVID, the acrylic market got hammered recently for two reasons. One is China and Italy produce most of the acrylic in the world. And of course, both of those countries shut down for a couple of months earlier this year, so none was being produced. And then everybody is making shields and other PPE out of acrylic. So it's getting to the point where you can't find acrylic for love or money. We're having the same issue. So if all of you go on the website and all buy a whole bunch of acrylic, you're going to be a little disappointed, I think, because it's getting very hard.
Maybe some shortages on certain ones. I got it.
Yeah. So we're doing our best. We've got an entire shipping container that's in customs right now, but I'm just warn everybody ahead of time if you want to buy some acrylic and you find out that none of it is available, I'll apologize right now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for letting us know that, Alan.
Yeah,
so this is why I have Alan on board, especially in this type of webinar, which is a very material-centric based webinar. All right, let's get going on some of the questions that we have here. There we go. John Kropp, can we use our 4-inch lens to cut thicker material? We have a Speedy 800 or Speedy 80 watt 8360. A 4-inch lens, of course, can cut any thickness of material, but your kerf is going to be much larger. A 4-inch lens has a beam diameter of 12 thousandths of an inch. And so effectively, it takes 3 times the amount of laser power to cut through the same thickness of material. It will give you a straighter cut, but it takes 3 times more power to cut through that thickness. And so it is a trade-off. So the answer is, on the short, is yes, it will work, but I don't recommend it unless you absolutely have to. I use the 4-inch lens for materials like foam and stuff where power is not as much of an issue. Most of the time, the 2 and the 2.5-inch lens is what you're going to want to use when it comes to cutting materials because your beam diameter is so much smaller. All right, next question. So how much will various wood finishes change the required settings? Alan, do you want to take this one, or?
Yeah, basically not much. If you're thinking of the thickness of the finish versus the thickness of the wood, it's so minuscule, it's so thin that it really won't make much difference to how your material engraves. A bigger thing, and I put a comment in about that, is focus. You can get different colors of engraving, darker engraving, by just changing the focus on your laser and running a little out of focus. You'll get darker engraving on the wood. But
Yeah.
if you're switching from something that's verathane to something that's lacquer to something that's oil rubbed, you probably won't notice any difference in your settings.
Yeah,
and
that would be my experience as well.
Yeah,
no setting difference whatsoever.
And the other thing with wood is it's entirely subjective. I mean, you can engrave just the surface of wood and get a nice light mark on it, or some people like to go, 1/4 of an inch into the wood. It's whatever you think looks good and whatever your customer is willing to pay for, because obviously the deeper you go, the more expensive it's going to be, the more time it's going to take you, right?
All right. The next question, what we got? Does it have an acrylic sample pack? Does it have an acrylic sample pack? I think, do we have an acrylic sample pack? So that'd be a good one for you, Alan.
Yeah, we do not have a set pack that you can purchase. What we usually do is suggest that people use those coupons that we give them and assemble their own, or buy the sample fans. Dave, in his presentation, showed the little fans of materials that show all the different colors. Every one of the TroGlass product lines will have its own color fan, so you could get that, and that'll give you basically a 2-inch by 2-inch chip of all of the colors that are available.
Yeah, and they're available right on our materials website.
Yes.
Okay. Greetings from Arkansas. Anyone used a film or coating to help with acrylic scratching? I have a sign that in high tough areas to concern about getting damaged. That's a tricky one. Do you know of any special film that can be put on that would actually protect the surface of acrylic? That's not one that I typically, we'll mask it when we're cutting it, but to protect it after it's an actual sign, like a hard coating of some sort, I'm not familiar with anything like that material-wise.
Yeah. The 3M sells an anti-graffiti film, which is basically just a clear vinyl, or it might be the Envision, not vinyl, material that you can put on over top. The other option that we would recommend for something like that is to use the reverse engrave. So even if you're not needing to color fill it in a different color, by using that reverse material, the actual information is protected by a 1/16 or even 1/8 thickness of clear acrylic. So, they could scratch up the surface, but it's not going to make the sign any less readable. And it's it's not like, with a front engraved sign where people can use a Sharpie and fill in the letters, or pick off the ADA letters with it. If you're using the reverse material, you're going to have the most durable sign that you can possibly produce.
Great idea. Okay, next question. What was used to adhere the two pieces of layered acrylic to the drop shadow sign? I typically use just your 3M double-sided adhesive. You can buy it in rolls, you can buy it in sheets. There's all different types of it. You can check the 3M websites, their adhesion, how sticky they are, how thick they are. It varies. Most sign shops will carry the 3M double-sided adhesive sheeting. I buy it in a roll, so I can just roll it out, stick it down. You can also buy it in sheets, but then you have to peel it off and put it on. And that's basically what it's used. I can get you the exact specs on it if you want the specs. But if you go back to the video where I kind of show some pictures and stuff like that, it actually has the number actually on the 3M adhesive, and then all you have to do is just search for that number, and you can order that at pretty much anywhere. I mean, I just bought mine on Amazon.
Yeah, you can also order your material with adhesive already applied to the back. So that would be a 3M 9502, which is sort of a general purpose epoxy based liner adhesive.
Can you order it on the back of, say, woods or acrylic? Can you add adhesive to any of our acrylic products?
We will put it on any of our products. We may contact you to make sure that you actually want that. For some things, it doesn't make sense, like clear acrylic. I wouldn't recommend that adhesive because it's not a pure optical clear acrylic, so you'd see it. Things like the reverse engraved materials, we would typically ask you if you really wanted it, because you can't really engrave cleanly through that adhesive. So if you had it on the back and then you wanted to engrave and color fill, that's going to be a mess. So if you're just
that's good.
If you're just cutting out letters,
we offered that.
Yeah, if you're just cutting out letters and you want to use that material, which is great for, again, because the color is protected by that clear acrylic on top, then yeah, the adhesive makes sense. But
yeah, you'll check.
Yeah, but literally anything. If you say, hey, I want this with adhesive on it, we will make sure that's what you really want, and then we'll put the adhesive on it for you.
All right. Next question. What kind of transfer tape do I use? I use the Transferite Ultra brand. You can pick it up at JDS, which I give you a QR code for. But really, any transfer tape works. I like a high tack, which is how sticky it is, because it likes to peel up if you don't have too high of a if you use like a low tack, which is how it won't actually adhere to some materials themselves. A high tack works very well with the laser. Transferite is the brand I use. Go to jds.com or jdsindustries.com, and they can hook you up. What is the power of laser that cut the stone? I think that you're referencing to the solid surface material. It is not stone. It is actually made from acrylic and bauxite, believe it or not, which is the mineral that aluminum is made out of. But the power that I used in that case, it was a 120 watt. I was cutting a 1/2 inch. It does take a lot of power. I think an 80 will get through it, but any less power than that, I wouldn't recommend it. Now, if you're just engraving it, no problem. Yes, it would take more power or maybe more passes, but it will engrave it with any wattage. But for cutting that thickness, I do recommend 80 watts and above.
A little trick for people that want to get into the solid surface: if you go in the yellow pages or search on Google for countertop installers or suppliers, and take them a box of donuts, because they throw away a ton of that material. You know, they cut out scraps. They cut out the sinks, they cut out, they cut off the corners, they do all kinds of stuff like that. They really do not get great yield out of their sheets typically. So they have a lot of scrap. Sometimes they will give it to you. Sometimes they'll they'll sell it to you for a discount. But it's much cheaper to do that than to actually try to buy full sheets of it, online or however.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. I bought a full sheet for my personal, and it was $300 to $400 per sheet, and they're like 15 feet long. So it's
Yeah.
it's not something you can't just buy a little piece of this stuff. That's a great tip. Would love some more information on the stone. Does it require a fusion laser? You mean a multiple wavelength laser, I think. Yeah, the solid surface material is, Alan just had a great one. Go to countertop shops. That is a great great tip to go through and get it. It does not require, it requires just a standard 10.6 CO2 laser to cut and engrave this material. So again, it is not stone, it is solid surface material. Big difference. The laser cannot and will not cut natural or any type of stone.
Yeah. It's commonly known as Corian. That's the, I think
Corion's the most common brand name. Yeah, you saw I put in like 6 or 8 different brand name logos that were on there. You know, Corian, Staron, there's lots of different ones. Solid surface material is the general term for it. Corian was the first manufacturer to come out with it, I believe.
Yeah. Other types of countertop materials, you can engrave all of those too. The laminate, the granite, the quartz, you can engrave them. You just can't cut them nicely.
Correct. Yeah. I have a Glowforge. Can I use these materials? I'm new. Sorry. Yeah, of course. Definitely you can engrave, you can cut all the materials that we have showcased today. Doesn't matter what brand of laser you have. There's nothing that I showed you today that you cannot do. Now, if you don't have enough wattage to cut, say, the solid surface materials, yeah, Glowforge probably don't have those type of high wattages. So I would stay away from cutting them, or thick acrylics. But all the acrylics, laminates, plastics, woods, absolutely.
The big thing with the Glowforge owners, there's 2 things that we hear a lot from Glowforge owners. One is that they have a 12 by 20 bed typically, which is a little awkward for the material sizes because most of the master sheets are 24 by 48. So we're going to sell you quarter sheets, which are 12 by 20, and it's much,
isn't it?
Sorry, 12 by 24. Yes, sorry. Much cheaper than what you're going to find pre-cut to Glowforge size material for. And most of the materials, any of the plastics, you can actually just score it with an X-Acto knife or a carpet knife and a straight edge, and then snap it. So we had somebody who was buying from Inventables. They were buying the glitter from Inventables, and they were thrilled to find us because they sent us a clip, and their quarter sheet of the Tro glitter was $10 more, I think. I think it was $10 more than what we would sell a full sheet for. So sometimes you're better to buy a sheet that's too big and cut it down yourself than to have somebody else cut it to size for your machine.
Or I find that when you have a small machine like that, just cut it in half. So you have 12 by 12 sheets. And,
exactly.
You know, it's not that way. You get, the whole benefit, kind of all equal sizes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Next questions. I don't know how many we have. Quite a few questions. So you had a picture of the multi-dimensional cupcake badge. What type of material and process was used to make that? That file itself was done with just the TroGlass Plastics, just the different color combination. And then we adhered additional versions of that same material. So you can use the TroGlass Plastics and you can cut it and then when it has adhesive on the backside, you can cut it and stick it to the surface as well. And so instead of like the samples that I used where I had woods and acrylics and plastics and I'm laminating them all together, you can take an engraved TroGlass plastic and then also cut it out with adhesive on the back and then stick it to the front. So that sign that you saw kind of in that project, and if you go to that project, you can scan that QR code. It's going to explain all the details on that one. I believe that's one of the projects towards the end. What was the material you mentioned before you were using with our pipe sizer tool? Pipe sizer. I thought you mentioned this was acrylic. Trying to think what they're talking about. What was the material you mentioned for using our pipe sizer tool? Pipe sizer tool.
Don't, unless they're referring to the Braille pen. I'm not sure what that was.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the pipe sizer tool is.
Maybe Dave, maybe you could post another comment with a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, yeah, I'm not
detail.
sure what you mean by pipe sizer tool. I'm not familiar with that term. So yeah, if you could repost it, maybe a little more clarification, please. Thank you. What is the dot size of the Braille dot hole? That's a great question. I get that question all the time. It is a 20-point font. You don't actually need to know the diameter. It is literally just a font. I just download the Braille True Type font, and then I set it to 20 point, and then I convert it from a fill to an outline, and then the laser cut it out. You just don't want to use too much laser power when you're cutting out. Otherwise, the beam, the hole can be a little too large by overpowering it. But it is just a 20-point font, which produces about a 60 thou hole diameter. I believe that's about what the diameter is. 50 to 60 thou. Yeah.
Yeah. The actual beads are 0.062.
Okay. And so we'll do it.
Yeah. The idea is that the bead goes in and the pressure is part of what holds it in. Yeah. The way Dave's doing it with the tape, that I haven't seen, but that's a great idea. If you have problems with that, with the beads not holding, you can also try a different method where you put the tape or just adhesive on top. After you've cut the holes, you put the adhesive on top of the holes and you push the bead right through the adhesive, and then the adhesive basically coats all of the entire bead, and it'll hold it in much stronger. So if you have a problem where you put the beads in and then you find that a couple of them are falling out, or people are complaining that they're being picked out or whatever, that's the other method. And like he said, Accent has a ton of great information, and that's one of the things that they talk about how to do on the site is an adhesive assist method.
Yeah, yeah, and I've used a lot of different methods. The problem with the laser is typically those are done with a mechanical engraver, and they're plunged in, which then gives you a perfectly parallel hole. Laser systems cut at a slight angle, and so that's why I always like to just peel up a little bit, pull the cutout areas away, stick a little bit of tape down. It takes 2 seconds. It guarantees that those aren't going to fall out. If your hole's a little bit too heavy, it's still going to stick into place. I just found it's an ideal solution. Like that big sign I did in literally in under 5 minutes, and that was only the second time I had done it. There's no faster method to do the simple ADA signs. All right, next question. Any tips on cutting maple veneer? We have no issues with cherry or walnut, but the maple was significantly more dense and required 2 vector passes. Maple veneer is just, the reason is maple is a very hard wood, and density will determine how much laser power you use. So more power is required for denser materials than materials that are not as dense. And also thickness can make a difference. Make sure your focus is proper. And then just probably on something like maple, slow it down a little bit. Rather than do multiple passes, I will typically just slow it down a little bit to where I make a cut through. When I'm going to cut something like this, if I'm not sure if it's going to cut, I will cut a little square in a circle. So I've got a straight and a radius. And then I will cut it out to make sure that my settings are correct before I cut my final file. Truly understand the density of different materials. Just because it's wood doesn't mean it's not created equal. I mean, people cutting like balsa wood I can cut through 2 inches, 3 inches thick on a laser system because it's so dense, so light. And then you go to something like mahogany or what was the ebony. Ebony is the hardest one I've ever done. 120 watt would barely cut 1/8 of an inch. So density can really make a difference, even though it's wood, on what your power settings are. So that's my method of what I would recommend doing that. What is the link to find the laser hacks? Our link is just Trotec. Just go to trotecLaserUSA.com on the YouTube channel. I believe there is halfway through I had a QR code that went to the laser hacks. You can scan that, or you can just go to YouTube and then type in Trotec Laser USA, and then or just do a search for Laser Dave and laser hacks, and you'll find me. So you give the settings for cut and engraving for the materials you sell. Do you want to answer that? Parameter settings?
Yeah, well, it's not that we give them for the materials we sell, we give them for the lasers we sell, because every laser is going to be different. And I believe you have the Glowforge. That was the other point I was going to make about the Glowforge. Is from what I understand, it's a little difficult to find settings, but there are laser or groups on the internet, Glowforge groups, that share settings for different materials. And that's, if you can find one of those groups, that seems to be the best solution. I mean, we can tell you, on a similar Trotec machine with the same wattage that you have, it's going to be these settings, but your machine doesn't run at the same speed. It may not use the same optics, so you may not be delivering the same amount of power to the actual workpiece. There's a lot of differences between laser brands, and so there really isn't, unless we had a Glowforge in Dave's office that he was going through all the materials and working settings. We
I don't have
wouldn't.
time for that.
Yeah. Maybe if there's another,
I think your suggestion, just contact your manufacturer as well as contact user groups of your own product, because it's going to help you out.
Yeah, if there's another user of the Glowforge in the seminar that wants to post who they use or where they find settings, that would be helpful too. And that, not reinvent the wheel.
Right. Does the 3M Envision print wrap film come with adhesive, or does it need to be added? I mean, it's just like vinyl. So peel and stick vinyl, it looks, feels, acts, and prints the exact same way. It is just not made from PVC. So yes, the adhesive is already on the back. It's designed to be peeled and stuck to windows. And again, if you've ever worked with vinyl, you wouldn't know the difference except for what it says on the outside of the box. Is it safe to watch the laser process? It's so bright, but it's fun to watch. Yeah, definitely. If a rule of thumb is, yes, there's no radiation that's coming off of a laser system that is damaging to your eyes, not like a welder, for example. And if you do have a fiber laser, there's a shield that will cover that. If it is too bright, like on some materials that are bright, it's just like looking into a light bulb. If you see spots, it can be damaging to your eyes. It's not that the radiation is just too bright. So yes, it is safe to watch the laser system, but if it is too bright, you don't want to focus on it, of course. Use your judgment on that, but it's not producing any type of wavelength or radiation that's going to harm you. Is there a reason you engrave wood from the top down instead of the bottom up, like with plastics? You want to take that one, Alan? Or
I was wondering the same thing, actually. We tended to engrave just about everything bottom up.
No, it doesn't matter with wood. I find with wood that the residue and staining that comes on the surface is the same either way. And so it makes no difference whatsoever on wood. Because you're engraving so much deeper of a pocket into wood, the staining and residue is the same. And when you engrave one bottom up and top down, side by side, and then ask somebody to look and see what's different, you can't tell the difference. So it doesn't matter. Yeah.
In my experience, you can sometimes play with it for different effects too, because the reason you're doing the bottom up is so that the exhaust isn't pulling the dust and everything back into what you've already engraved. So you're basically always engraving on virgin material. You're not engraving through dust. And with wood, because it's the resin that gives you the color, it's the smoke that gives you the color, sometimes you get a better look doing top down because you're intentionally having that resin and smoke go across your engraved. So it's a bit of a trade-off though, because you sometimes will see a different color at the last little bottom, 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch where it's not getting the exposure to the smoke. So that's the only trade-off that you have to look at is the better color worth that little bit of variation at the end.
And that really depends on what settings you're using. I find
Yeah.
little to no difference, and the residue's wiped off anyway. So
Mhm.
it really does not matter. And that's my opinion. You can try it either way, see what works best for you.
Mhm. Yeah. Again, with the wood, it's all subjective, right?
Yeah. Most
It's,
materials are.
yeah. Well, a lot of materials are either engraved or not engraved. With wood,
Yeah.
it's engraved. It's
Yeah. Well, you got
engraved
different. Yeah.
shallow where it's engraved deep. That's what I mean.
Will this video be viewable on the Trotec YouTube channel? Yes, TroTecUSA, the link that you actually received to watch this, will take you to it at any time, as well as you can go to TroTecUSA on our Trotec on the YouTube and watch this. It'll be posted shortly after this event. Any chance of applying a document that has all the QR codes from this presentation? I would, yeah, I guess, but my suggestion is just go through the different sections and watch the recording based on what you're interested in, and then just scan it right from your phone, right from your computer, right from your tablet. This way you have reference. I mean, I can give it to you a bunch of list of it, but it's not going to be as easy access for reference. I'd have to write it all down and specify what each one is for. And if you do have any questions, you can feel free to contact us, and we can see about putting something like that together. What spray paint do you use on acrylic? Oh, that's a great question, believe it or not. And this is one that I come into a lot of times. And the one thing you do not want to use is alcohol-based paints. If you ever use alcohol-based cleaners or paints on acrylic, you get microfracturing. Because the alcohol actually gets into the cutting and the engraving process and actually cause fragmentation into the acrylic. And so when I use spray paint, I use a water base, or I use an acrylic-based paint or spray paint, so that it does not cause this problem. If you start to see little fractures and fissures that form after you paint something, it's because your spray paint has alcohol in it. So any type of spray paint or paint that does not have alcohol in it will work. I typically like acrylic-based paints on acrylic because you're guaranteed not to have that problem.
Yeah, I would expand that a little bit, because it's actually alcohol is the worst one and the most common, but almost any type of solvent can do the same thing. Basically, what it's doing, the lasering puts thermal stress in the acrylic. And when you apply a solvent to it or alcohol to it, that releases that thermal stress, and it shows up. They call it crazing, but it's cracking basically everywhere that you've engraved and then painted. Just because I've been burned a couple of times in the past with what I thought was acrylic spray paint. For example, Krylon sells a paint for plastic. It is definitely not for lasered acrylic. It's most of the paints for plastic have extra solvent in them, so that it actually basically almost melts into the surface of the plastic. What I like to use, just to be, like I say, better safe than sorry, is the little 2-ounce bottles of craft paint from Hobby Lobby or Michael's or anywhere that sells stencil paints. And you can buy little, it's called a Preval sprayer, Preval.
Preval, yeah.
Yeah, and they come with a bottle. You just mix up, if you want to spray it, you just mix it up in that little bottle, spray it on. It's water-based. It's definitely not going to hurt the acrylic, and you're good. I'm just, as an example of this, we had a customer who's actually in the seminar with us today, who experienced crazing on some of the materials, and we couldn't figure out why. We thought it was material. We weren't really sure. It turned out that he had just changed brands of citrus cleaner. He was using one that was perfectly fine, and then they got a different brand, and that's what was causing the problem. So you really have to be careful with your cleaners or your solvents that you're
Yeah.
using on any of the acrylic based materials. So
Absolutely. And just to expand on Alan's thing, the Prevail little sprayers, you can pick those up right at Home Depot or Lowe's.
exactly. Yeah.
Right in the paint section. The other spray paint I have found that works is Ace sells a water-based spray paint. It's a H2O, it says on the front, and it seems to work okay.
Yeah.
I've not had any of those issues. So
yeah, if it's water-based.
Yeah, water-based, and so for the safety reasons, just to be sure, if it has to be sprayed, you can either mix it yourself, like you say, or if you want to buy a can, just make sure that it's water-based. All right. Whenever making a multi-layer sign using plastic, what are some good tips when cutting the top layer plastic without cutting the bottom layer of plastic? So you're talking like, I think he's referring to like a kiss cut. Kiss cut would be the process of when you laminate more than one layer together, and so that you're cutting through but not going into that bottom layer. And what I would suggest for kiss cutting is some trial and error testing. I will usually take a small piece of the plastic, put it together, and then cut out several little areas to where cut through. If I've got too much power, then I'm going to usually adjust the speed. So I'll leave the power alone, then I'm going to adjust my speed up, and then so up and down until I get a perfect kiss cut. Kiss cut is the process of cutting through one layer, but not into the layer behind it. It does take a little bit of trial and error settings, but based on what material and thickness and wattage you're using, that you're processing, make sure that you do run a test. My suggestion is just a little bit of trial and error testing so that it until you get the results that you want. And then again, don't just do one simple thing. Always do a circle and a square, because radius cuts and straight cuts can be different. You want to make sure that all radiuses as well as straights cut equally. Any tips for avoiding the notching marks on the backside of acrylic from bounce back when vector cutting? How did you use the wet paper towels? And that is a great, and that's a new laser hack that I have in my new Laser Hacks 2.0 seminar that we have promoted. The wet paper towel works exceptionally well. You can also raise it over the cutting table. We also make an acrylic cutting grid table, as well as an acrylic slat cutting table, which will eliminate that. I also have a laser hack where I cut these little laser blocks out that actually are placed onto the cutting grid, and then you raise the acrylic over the top of that. That is the best way to do that. The wet paper towel trick is ideal for cutting acrylic because you can take 3 or 4 layers of wet paper towel and place it underneath of acrylic before you cut it. 1, it reduces the tick marks and reflection points, and 2, it eliminates the flaring and flaming on the back side, and it has worked exceptionally well in my testing. I've engraved granite, but the design doesn't weather well. What do you use for paintville designs to make it more permanent?
Marine enamel.
Marine enamel. There you go.
Go to a paint to a boat yard, or I can't think of what the name is, but basically somebody that sells the ropes and all of the sails and all of the stuff for boats. You can sometimes find it in good paint stores too. It's called marine enamel, and that stuff works great for outdoor. We've done bronze and brass signs and color filled it with that. It'll also work with the granite.
Great idea.
I would recommend, even though you don't really need it, because the granite surface, if the granite surface is nice and smooth and polished, you don't really need it, but I would still recommend using the masking, either the liquid mask if it's a rough surface, or the paper mask if it's a smooth surface, just to make the cleanup a little easier.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, the liquid mask won't work on rough surfaces. It has to be polished.
Yeah. Okay.
That stuff won't stick. But yeah, that is a good point. And granite is, you're not going to put any depth in it with a laser. So masking it, but that is a great boat enamel because it's designed for UV and it's designed for harsh environments, salt spray. That's a great that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alan.
No worries. Been there, done that.
All right, next question. Does Trotec have a dual layer ABS, acrylic ABS combination sheet? That's a great one for you, Alan.
Believe it or not, yes, we do. the satin material, the Troply satins, are actually ABS with a acrylic cap on it. We don't typically suggest using that for lasers. It's meant for rotary engraving because the acrylic cap on there, on the regular engraving materials, the acrylic cap, the foil, is 1/1000th of an inch thick. And that's why you can engrave it so quickly and cleanly, is because you're really not removing that much material. On the Troply materials that have that acrylic cap, it's a 12 thou acrylic, so it's 12 times as thick. So it's going to take you 12 times as long, and it's not going to be as clean. And then typically when you cut ABS, you get more melting, you get a raised edge because it expands when you heat it. It smells terrible. So there's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't recommend that material necessarily for acrylic or ABS, or that for lasering the acrylic ABS materials. But if you have a specific application that you are asking about, you can either post another question or email me separately afterwards, and I'll talk to you about it.
Perfect. Good information. Did you say you have COVID sign templates on your website? Yes, there's a link right there towards the end. If you click on that, there's several different COVID type signs. I've also produced a COVID webinar several weeks back, which also include all different files on it. So you go to TroTecUSA, you can go to that, which is additional files plus the ones on our website. What are the suppliers for liquid mask? There's only one supplier that I know of, and that is Johnson Plastics Plus. They are the only supplier that I know in the laser industry. So go to JPP, johnsonplasticplus.com. I believe they are the ones that sell the liquid mask.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. You're very welcome, Derek. Have any other questions?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, Corey's on it.
Anybody want to know how acrylic is made? How the engraving materials are made? I can tell you all that stuff.
Yeah, we don't have all day here. All right, perfect. That's it. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and like to our YouTube channel, and we'll be here next Thursday with another fun and exciting webinar.